thoughts about the new virtual format. Who's itching to say something about this new format, keeping in mind that this is public?
I've just got to say that the way it looks reminds me of the novel Snow Crash. Like, that's exactly how I imagined the metaverse looking. And so personally, I'm here for it. It's the 90s cyberpunk dream. So even if it is a little bit like awkward sometimes, I think it looks really cool.
Yeah, that's excellent. I love coming in with Neil Stephenson deep cuts for all those who are fans of Hero Protagonist.
Yeah.
We should have set up some Amazon associates links so y'all can get paid on this one. You know, just get to the books.
Incoming. What do you think, Pop, of the new format?
Look, I mean, making the best do with what we have there. You know, applaud the CNCF. I thought the keynotes were very well handled, right? In terms of just how, you know, the interactivity through it. It was pretty cut and dry, and also I think folks that haven't been able to have these shows be accessible. It's much more accessible to those people. So, you know, I think that to me, it's a plus. But again, is it the same thing as going to a show and just seeing folks grabbing a beer or hanging out and talking? I mean, that nothing will ever replace that, right?
Yeah, no, and that's actually my big challenge is my favorite part of Kubecon is always the hallway track, hanging out in the hallway, talking to people, what they're doing, what they're building. And I feel like beyond just seeing what people are tweeting about, we're trying to fill in a little bit with this kind of panel. But I noticed that, Kit, you've actually been bombing the Kubernetes Slack channel. So are you kind of creating your own hallway track?
Well, it's funny on the hallway track. I tweeted about that yesterday, joking, you know, I'm trying to find the hallway, and Priyanka actually directed me to the Slack channel. And one of the fun things, you know, on the point about the online, I kind of agree with Pop. It's like we're making the most of what we got here. You know, everybody is. It would have been a shame to cancel the event entirely. You know what I mean? Which we thought may have been on the block at some point. One of the things that I got to do, or we're doing for Kubecon, is we're doing these AMA sessions this week. I don't know if anybody's seen that, but we got to do them in one of the Slack channels, channel 6, Kubecon Noble 9, which is very creatively named. We had Tim Hawken this morning, and we had Matt Moore and Vili Akis yesterday. Tomorrow we got Brendan Burns and Alex Hidalgo, and then we'll have Michelle Morali and Matt Klein from the Envoy Project on Thursday. So we're having a blast with that, trying to make the most of it because the online format is just so different than what we're used to, and just trying to stay connected to people.
And this is in the Kubernetes Slack, and what channel is it in?
Well, it's not the Kubernetes. This is another point of confusion. So there's a CNCF Slack and there's a Kubernetes Slack, and what we're talking about here is the CNCF Slack. So it's cloud-native.slack.com. And then there's a bunch of channels in there, a lot of active stuff going on in the Mix and Mingle and the random channel.
Oh, very cool. Okay. Yeah, KubeCon Mix and Mingle 4 KubeCon Mix and Mingle.
Yeah, the numbers I think are, they denote something. They're a naming convention of some sort.
Well, there's about 7,000 people in there, so it looks like the party is bumping.
That's popping.
Yeah, it's popping.
Pun intended.
We haven't heard from you. Go ahead.
I like how the channels at least allow me to. So I think we've done a great job with organizing a complex, large-scale conference quickly and doing it virtually and trying to keep everybody connected. My personal issues I have had are, one, remembering things that are going on and when to go to things. But what I do like about the Slack channels and everything is, unlike hallway tracks, where you sometimes don't know who you were talking to for like the last 30 minutes. I know for a fact who I was talking to for the last 30 minutes in the Slack channel. And so you can actually, start to like carry that connection on after KubeCon. And that's what I like. And because CNCF Slack's going to be there post KubeCon, it'll continue on to the next KubeCon. So you can actually resume some of those conversations at KubeCon North America, which I think is going to be really neat to see how we reconstitute these Slack channels at that time, and that the history's there, because all the previous KubeCons we didn't have the history of track, the channel track. The track.
Yeah,
you know,
do
kind of,
you-
and could I add some,
Okay, go
some
ahead.
to that, Matt, if you don't mind. Matt, you know, like I totally agree having that interaction. I mean, we have like a vendor channel. Sysdig has a channel there that we basically folks are interacting. So, you know, Chris Nova this morning did an amazing talk with the folks from Shopify, and basically they were interacting and talking about what's going on with Falco, which is our open source CNCF project, and be able to, like, you know, have some folks get in the channel and talk about them. Like you said, have that paper trail. Fantastic. That to me is worth the price of admission right there.
Do you feel like people are being as open over the Slack? Because I always felt like people in the hallway track were telling me things that like they shouldn't tell people, or that they wouldn't otherwise put publicly. Do you feel like people are willing to share like the inner secrets still over Slack?
I don't think so. I think people are being a little bit more close-lipped about it since there's because that paper trail exists. Like there absolutely is a record of it. The upside to that, you might not get like juicy gossip anymore. But the upside to that is that I have found that people are way less likely to be awful in general. Like you don't see as many people willing to like casually say something crappy to someone else, because it is way easier to like get a COC involved if somebody actually says something awful in Slack versus a passing comment in the hallway when you don't know who they are.
Yeah, we actually did have an incident in the last Kubecon where we had a photographer there to do portraits for people, and someone came and started verbally assaulting them, and that required some sprinting across the show floor to deal with. But we don't have to do that this time, so that's nice. To bring this topic kind of to a head here, I was thinking about this in terms of other KubeCons, and of course, KubeCon is no stranger to interesting occurrences. We, of course, had snow in Austin, which blew everybody's minds. And then in Seattle, I think it was 2 years ago, that we had power outages. When people were actually trying to give talks, their sessions went offline. So this, you know, all things considered, people are still giving talks. I was curious, and then we'll move into some of the news here. I was curious, are any of you not watching live? Let me phrase it this way. Have any of you actually watched a live session, or have you only watched replays? And am I missing something if I'm only watching the replays?
I'm going to be honest and say I only watched the replays on this one because of the time zones and my own schedule. I'm trying to juggle. It's the nice thing about a physical conference is that you're able to create that time box for the conference where your employer knows you're sitting at the conference. The problem with this conference and employers is that you're doing both at the same time. And so I find that watching the sessions afterwards, watching everything afterwards at 2x is nice.
Oh, you're watching them at 2x.
Well, I can do more at once. Yeah, more.
3x if you can. I think there's a larger question about, and it's not just for KubeCon. I think this is about embracing the digital format generally. And you know, like Democratic National Convention was yesterday, and is trying to figure out how to be in these virtual formats. So I think there's like a broader question about what's the right way to consume content and interact with people. We're still figuring it out, and I think, you know, the multi-channel aspect of what we're doing right now with some combination of live, some combination of text, some combination of pre-recorded materials, I think is kind of the state of the art for right now. And I'm hoping that we get back to normal conferences. But if we don't, that this kind of digital, you know, adjunct to live conferences can really kind of enhance the experience. I just don't think we're there yet.
If you're going to interact with the community, if you're going to interact with customers and know something, you have to adopt these ways. And again, we're making, you know, the strides that we're making. I think we're going to have to continue to do it because I don't, you know, again, I'm not a pessimist per se, but I don't see this, you know, till at least, you know, mid 2021. I mean, that's just my own personal opinion.
I think from a vendor point of view, younger vendors in the space, I think, would adapt better to these types of conferences than, say, the older vendors, enterprise companies. So I feel that this might work better for the startups in the world to be able to get their message out there versus having to deal with the large, big corps sitting in the vendor booth.
I can attest as an early stage startup that I feel we have more access and opportunity than I would have had in a larger company, having done these from both sides, large and small companies. And, you know, we get to be scrappy and be guerrilla, and it kind of levels the playing field for us. And I kind of like that. Definitely, you know, like the fact that our booths are a startup hall and the platinum hall are the same booth. It's kind of a nice thing for us. I can see it from the other side, maybe not being as exciting, but from a startup perspective, it's great.
Yeah, but those guys got billions, so, you know.
Well, so with that, I thanks for all that commentary, and I'd like to move on to some of the news items from the day. The first one that I saw that kind of caught my eye was that EKS is now launching on ARM. Does anybody feel like we're going to see a change, mass adoption of ARM, people fleeing from x86? Did Apple make it happen by deciding that they're going to switch their hardware to ARM and now everything's solved?
Well, AWS did it a year ago, like, or whatever it was, you know, in the last you know, Vegas show, that they were launching, you know, EC2 instances on ARM. So you know, again, it's not only Apple, I think, solidified the deal, so to speak, here, but it's all of the rest of the cloud players coming in line. And I'm sorry to jump ahead of you, Kit. I think you were going to say something there, but that's just.
I was just going to catch to answer this, is what I was going to say.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't think that I agree with Pop. I don't think Apple did this. Adoption for ARM has been ramping up and accelerating for a while now. I do think that the ARM on Macs thing is interesting. I would like a dev kit if anybody at Apple wants to float me one. Just a heads up. But I think it's really cool. I like ARM. I have some historical problems kind of morally with Intel. So I'm willing to jump ship personally. And so like wider adoption of ARM for me is a better thing. For a lot of embedded engineers, it is a better thing. I would very much like to see this trend continue, but it is a trend that started a few years ago.
Linus Trevold posted his sort of famous rant about 2 years ago about how ARM would never be a thing so long as it wasn't on developer machines, because no one would write code for an architecture that they weren't building their software on, and then the code would never be good because it was always going to be for a foreign architecture. So with Apple coming on, does that kind of like, you know, close both sides of the loop? If we're getting ARM developer machines, are we going to start using ARM Cloud?
I think so. I think there's going to be some growing pains. We'll have like a hot second where we're kind of like go back to the Power PC days and some software doesn't get released for the new Macs immediately. But I don't think that will last long. I think it will be a little bit of growing pain. And then, yeah, it's going to lead to widespread adoption of ARM. I think that ends Linus's argument.
I think Amazon is doing, I think there's a very long-term strategy here that they're executing on. And I mean, the immediate thing that I thought about when I saw the GA release for ARM on EKS is that your EKS cluster just got 20% cheaper. So to run certain workloads on Kubernetes is now cheaper on Amazon than it used to be. And that's going to draw users in.
Well, especially with the Spectre and Meltdown mitigations, they got like 15 to 20% more expensive, right? So now speculative execution is not really an issue on the ARM, I don't think.
Not as far as I know, but I'm not an expert there. But not that I've heard of.
Yeah, all right.
You know, and then we can't forget that ARM also supported, not supported yet, but they're working towards running ARM jobs inside of Fargate. So you can actually just spin something up in Fargate on ARM as well. And then also ECR supports multi-architecture as well. So that's going to be an ARM future, and Amazon's very much preparing themselves for that. I'm looking forward to what whatever reInvent's going to be this year, what they say there.
I want to move to our next segment, and before I do, I want to tease. Hopefully, everybody has a favorite talk to share after we get through this segment. But this is a segment that we call Future or Fad, in which we ask the panel about certain technologies or trends and whether they are the future or if they are just a passing fad. And the first one we have is GitOps. Kit, I know that you really think that GitOps is a fad, so why don't you start off?
I do not think that GitOps is a fad, for the record. I'm not a fan of buzzwords in general. I do think that GitOps communicates something that I like, and to me, it's really about treating the source repository and as a place of truth and a place where you can move a lot of your arguments into code, and you can follow workflows that make a lot of sense. And it's something we've embraced. And if you look at sort of infrastructure as code and CI/CD workflows, things like that, I think GitOps is a reasonable way to talk about it. And I think it's sort of more specific in a way than DevOps, which is I would say, a more general term. But I think the philosophy of updating your source repository and then having all the other things kick off from there, your build processes, CI/CD, release, infrastructure updates, et cetera, from there, I think it makes sense. And I think it's actually being used in practice. Leave aside the buzzword for a second.
Kat, Pop, what do you think?
I'm sorry, Kat, you want to go first?
Oh no, go for it.
I'm of the mind, like I said, I've had, I don't know if you all know, I have a podcast with a podcast, and I've had like a bunch of, folks that are mainstays in the Kubernetes industry, so I've had like, like Stephen Augustus, for instance, and he just, that's somebody that literally, that their whole kind of release cycle is completely GitOps up. And, I have friends that, obviously are working for like GitLab and GitHub and those types of things. So I think at the end of the day, it's, it's here to stay. It's a mechanism for deploying things quickly, and right now speed is the thing, right? So
yeah, for me, I'm trying to be open-minded about it, because on the one hand, I absolutely hate buzzwords and jargon. I think they artificially create a barrier to entry for people who are either like brand new junior engineers, or they're coming from a different space. So I try very hard to avoid using terms like that. However, we used to think of DevOps as that exact kind of buzzword, and now it's not. It's just, it is an industry term, and you have to know what it means. So the question is, like, is GitOps here to stay? If so, I don't have a problem with this term, because it's just going to become, it's no longer going to be a buzzword. It's no longer going to be jargon. It's going to be something that we have to define, and we have to have intro level tutorials on, and that's okay. But if it is just like a flash in the pan fad thing, then I hate it. So it kind of comes down to like, is this actually a thing or not?
So you're saying if it's the future, you're all into it, but if it's fad, you're not.
If it is a fad, I don't think we should call it that. If it's a fad, we should call it something that like more clearly defines what it is, because right now it feels like it's riding on like DevOps.
And I think, again, if you think about it, there's things like there's frameworks, and then there's actual like process, right? So it's like, it's sometimes you hear these terms, and it's just like, look, these are just like workflows. These are not, they're either workflows or they go into frameworks of some sort. And so whatever the thing that's, like you said, if it's blocking adoption, as Kat said, I totally agree with that. I'm totally agreeing with everything you say, Kat. I mean, it's amazing.
Thank you.
So Matt, I want to get your take, and but before I do, I wanted to say that for my part, I'm at this point basically a GitOps maximalist, and I'll tell you why. Because I cannot tell you how many people I still talk to who are sharing tips for how to not accidentally break things that they're connected to in production. And for example, I saw a Reddit post. It was a few months ago, but it was like the very top of the Kubernetes subreddit. And it was like, hey, check out this cool tool that will show you it when you're connected to your production cluster, so you don't accidentally delete all your pods. And a bunch of people were sharing stories about how they were deleting things in production on accident. And I thought, what are you doing? Why are you even connected to production? What the hell is going on? GitOps, 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 GitOps. Let's just do GitOps all day, because this would never be a problem. The very fact that you're sharing these tips are telling me that you're doing ops wrong. So I feel really aggressive about it. So hopefully that's not too over the top. But Matt, with that, what do you think?
So I feel like I'm more sitting in Kit's camp right now on this, mostly because when I look at the GitOps ecosystem of vendors that are addressing it, I feel a lot of times that this phrase is perhaps an answer to a question that's not been asked at the moment. And are we trying to shoehorn a lot of existing ways of managing things anyways, and how we want to solve problems into what we're going to call GitOps? And so for me, it's still a marketing phrase. It's not moved into a philosophy like DevOps or a practice. So that's kind of where I think about it right now. I've seen some interesting scenarios with GitOps, but I've actually have never seen a user using it in day-to-day production to manage large environments.
Well, I think we should clarify, because Vinay is sort of asking about what GitOps really even means, and that is a decent question. It's a decent question. I mean, in principle, the idea is all of your infrastructure, all of your application configuration, everything should be stored as code, and then the changes that are made to production are always just changes to code that are then applied to production, rather than potentially making a small change here. And as Matt just pointed out, it's infrastructure as code. So using that Terraform, using those kinds of things to manage everything. And I also see in the chat, Omer is saying they use GitOps to manage everything, over 100 engineers. So I'm, as the maximalist in the group, I'm happy to see that.
We should shout out to Weaveworks as well, to Alexis over there, who's kind of written a lot about GitOps. I think may even have coined the phrase. I'm not sure.
Oh, definitely want to give credit to Alexis then.
We're seeing things like Sync release the security tools that address infrastructure as code, Terraform, like looking for basically, misconfigurations that are common in these environments. And so I think it'll be a pattern that will start to be adopted, but I'm still this is Web 2.0 for me at the moment.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Well, so to move on from GitOps, future
move on.
Future's moving on. Future or fad, service mesh. And we actually, I think Kit,
probably one of the most controversial topics in our community. And I'm not touching it with a 10-foot pole, and I'm sorry, I'm not touching it.
So Kit and Matt and I actually talked about this on Kit's, is it the Noblecast? Is that what it's called, Kit?
It's the Noble 9 YouTube channel.
The Noble 9 YouTube channel. And Pop has already opted out, so I think we should start with you, Kat.
All right. So service meshes get back kind of back into my problem with isolated corners of tech in general, in that in theory, a service mesh makes it easier to deal with the infrastructure equivalent of spaghetti code you have managing your 850 million microservices, right? And like that's a good thing, because I want things to be less complicated, but I worry that it is an additional that additional abstraction layer actually makes things harder to understand when something goes wrong. So I don't know. I don't have to deal with them very often. I'm a developer advocate. I don't have to write production code. Like y'all's problems are not something that I want to deal with. But, I build demos, but I don't think service meshes are a bad thing. I do think they are probably here to stay, for sure. There's absolutely a complexity issue with the way we build things today. So in my opinion, service meshes are here to stay. They are a good thing, with some reservations.
Yeah, fair enough.
I've talked to a number of people, and I posted the link to the YouTube channel. I talked to a number of people about service mesh over the last few weeks, and including Matt Klein, and talked to Tim Hawken about some of this as well. And what I've kind of learned from this is there's a lot of fragmentation, but the value of service mesh will come when you no longer have to think about it. When it's just in the clusters and it just works for you and it can accelerate your apps. You can give service level indicators or service KPI data, so you have consistent monitoring. That's what's going to really drive the value of service mesh. It's unfortunate in a way that we have some fragmentation. I think people are trying to fix that with things like OSM and SMI, et cetera. But in the fullness of time, it appears there will be a variety of options for service mesh. And to Kat's point, I think it's a good thing, and I think it's here to stay.
Yeah, it'll get there. It's not there yet, but it will get there.
If you think about the orchestration wars we all went through, right? You know what I'm saying? Something came out on top, and I think that's gonna be here. Now, I'm sorry, I promised Dan I wouldn't say anything. Now I caught myself up, but I had to say it. There will be one service mesh to rule them all, and they're all gonna just fight it out. And whatever's honestly that's gonna be most beneficial to everybody that's using needs some level of connectivity between their pods and their routes and all of those things. Then it's all gonna be a benefit.
I think when we're looking at sorry, Pop.
No, go ahead. I'm done, bud. Sorry.
When we're thinking about service mesh, I think what we're trying to answer is like there's certain stories out of service mesh that will be part of the future. And like observability and things like that. And so how I've been thinking about service mesh, I'm not even going to get into the different service meshes out there, is that you should think about service mesh in the same way as you think about monitoring or logging. Is that it's going to aid you in triaging issues inside your production environment. And that's where you should focus on those stories, I think, of how do I want to triage problems? And then that's where how I'd begin to choose a service mesh from there. Like, what are my stories I need to be able to solve? Because there's a lot of complexity in service mesh now. Won't name that.
Yeah, I'll take the final word on service mesh before we move on to the next topic. And simply to say, I don't know what service mesh you'll be using in 5 years, but it's almost certain that it will be based on Envoy.
100,000%. 100,000.
That's the only part. That's the only part that I think we've all figured out.
Yeah.
So future or fad, this one is probably less controversial, or maybe it's controversial that it's included. Serverless, future or fad, and I'll actually kick off this one and say that I feel like serverless is a bit of a fad, to be honest. I think people were super excited about it, and everyone was like, "Oh, we'll just dump everything into functions, and then who cares about what happens underneath?" And then it turned out that that's actually like kind of a terrible idea. Like 99% of the time, I suppose it's like rotary telephones. You're going to find one randomly wherever you go, but they're not really important or the future. So there's my hard take. Go ahead.
Hey, Paul, what's that in the corner? That's a serverless platform.
Exactly.
I pretty much stand on the side of it being a fad. I haven't seen it move out of the toy phase and move into serious production use across large percentages of enterprises out there. And so I keep it it's in the fad column at the moment for me. Versus like how I look at these technologies is how much, when we're talking about end users here, and so how many end users are using it, but more importantly, how much revenue is on top of it as a technology. And while we're seeing Kubernetes continue to grow, the amount of revenue that's being built on top of it for companies and companies shifting critical systems to it, I don't see the same for serverless across the entire ecosystem.
So I'm going to maybe take a different tack on this. I think that serverless has, we all have a conception of what serverless means, and I think it has its place in the overall compute spectrum. I think of things like Lambda and App Engine even, and what's going on with like Knative, and it's not necessarily functions that's or the idea that everything will be running on serverless, I think maybe is misguided, but as a part of the architecture or a part of the full solution to be glue between different applications, for example, I think makes a lot of sense. Will we be calling it serverless, I think is a question mark, or will it just be easier to use platform as a service or some other marketing term that people will have, I think is questionable. There's some great tech out there, that's being developed on top of Kubernetes or even just as cloud services.
Yeah, Knative seems very strong. There's a lot of good ones out there. For sure.
OpenFaz, another one that like Alex Ellis is working on. I'll say this, and I don't know if I'm dating myself by saying I'm going to do like a Tywin Lannister quote. I'm going to say there's a tool for every task and there's a task for every tool, right? So basically, like if you think of the intent, and I've had like Kelsey Hightower, for instance, on the podcast, and we had him yesterday for our containers, Cards Against Containers for a Cause, and he said, look, when this topic of serverless came up, it's the intent of your application or what you're trying to do, and there's things out there that'll help you. So if it's going to be Kubernetes, if it's going to be legacy, monolithic applications, it doesn't matter. It's how you're deploying your applications that's going to be there. So that my stance on it, I don't think it's a fad. I think it's going to be a future. It could be workloads could be running on it. Workloads can be running on Kubernetes. Workloads will still be running on VMs, even to this day. So, and there'll probably be an abstraction even further than serverless, where we're just getting right down to the thread that's doing, the action. So that's my take.
Internetless.
Yeah, I'm not going to go so far as to call it a fad. Personally, like, first of all, I've been hearing about it for way too long for it to feel like a fad. It feels like I've been hearing about serverless for like years at this point.
Like Pogs.
So, yeah. So it's definitely, hogs never go away. So it's not, I don't think it's a fad. I think that when serverless first became a thing, we overhyped it and misrepresented the scale of what serverless would be useful for. I think serverless is going to stick around. I agree with Kit and Pop basically here. It's going to stick around. It's just not gonna, we're not gonna be putting like freaking everything in a serverless function. You know, it is going to be used for like glue between applications or for like very, very specific small tasks. I personally don't have a reason to use it very often, but I think it's cool technology that is probably here to stay. We're just not going to be running the entirety of every application written from now until the end of time on it.
Yeah. Well, good takes all around. The next one is hybrid. And I was thinking today about Anthos and what they're trying to do. And kind of related, we have another story coming for discussion a little bit about how COVID-19 is affecting people's moves and transitions into cloud. So on the topic of hybrid, Kit, I saw you smirking. So you get the first word.
I don't know. Hybrid to me is it's the reality is that hybrid as a concept, at least, or is a destination for compute for the long term. I don't think everyone will move to public cloud. I think there's going to be cases where you're going to want to run things consistently across different places. You're going to want to run things in different, your real estate, other real estate, etc. I think the question mark about hybrid is how coordinated it is above the infrastructure layer. Like, if you kind of like, do I really want to have apps that are, kind of elastically hybrid across these different domains? Or is it that I just need to have infrastructure provision and then, schedule to it? Because I think there are trade-offs in all these different environments. But, the hybrid word's not going to go away. It's just like hyperscaler or whatever. It's like this word, it's... And since you can't say multi-cloud, because I think that's sort of offensive, you got to stick with something kind of...
Yeah, my thing here is it feels like every 5 or 10 years or so in technology, the term hybrid comes back around and it means something different every single time. Yeah. I heard the term hybrid a lot, 15 years ago when I worked in the data backup industry. And at the time, hybrid meant like some combination of data stored at your physical location and the rest of, and some of it stored at like rack space or something. So history tells me that this term is a fad.
I think that's a great point, that the term itself is maybe not even useful. I would say though that I kind of think that hybrid or being multi-cloud or those kinds of things, it reminds me a lot of the language wars that we went through in like the 90s and 2000s. I remember I worked at a place that was a .NET shop, and they said everything's Silverlight. That's the future.
Oh wow, I forgot about Silverlight entirely.
Right?
Oh God, that existed.
And I remember that there was a small team. There were like 35, 40 engineers all working Silverlight, and they'd been working on this platform for about 11 months. And then there was this R&D team that was allowed to use whatever language they wanted. And one weekend, they built the entire platform that the entire rest of the team had spent a year making, and they shipped an upgrade over what the original platform was. And I thought, oh, we should just use whatever language is best for the job. Like, we shouldn't try to like hack everything in. And that has become the predominant force. And I actually think that despite AWS's best efforts and everybody else's best efforts, I think that cloud is just going to be the same thing. I feel like people are going to move to this, like, yeah, we're just going to use like whatever cloud or on-prem that we feel like that's best for the job. Cause like, why wouldn't we?
I think
I think that's the way it's gonna go. We're not gonna just bounce around across 3 different cloud providers forever. That's awkward, and I feel like it introduces a layer of complexity that is unnecessary for questionable benefit.
I think thinking about it from an application, like hybrid might be too far down into the weeds now, where the application will want to live and run where it makes best sense for it to live and run. So as an app developer, I will want to be able to say decorate my application upon in a CI/CD pipeline, for example, where upon deployment, the application is decorated so it has a geographical, it's bound geographically, which means maybe it can't be deployed anywhere outside of GDPR, and perhaps the only location in GDPR for my business is an on-premise environment that it's going to get delivered into. But if it doesn't have that constraint, perhaps it gets deployed into Amazon. But I think thinking about where am I going to deploy my app at that level is probably going to go away. We're going to start to think about what is kind of like more of these attributes my application has that are going to be business requirements, regulatory requirements, performance requirements, things like that.
Well, that's actually a good transition point out of our future or fad segment into some of the news that came out today. And we're going to start with one that the team at CodeFresh actually drove, which was there was a DevOps survey completed that included, among other things, how COVID-19 was affecting infrastructure choices. And it looks like about 58% of respondents said that because of COVID-19, they were actually planning to move more to the cloud while keeping some on-prem, sort of hybrid, with some saying that they were going to try to go more to the cloud and some saying they're going to keep on-prem. Is this a blip, or do you think that this is the future, just accelerated?
Without a doubt. And again, one of the things I was going to say back to the future fad thing there is basically, if you think about tools that like let's say HashiCorp with Terraform and other tools that are out there that are kind of leveling the playing field for you can just deploy your applications anywhere. There's monitoring tools, there's security tools. Again, SysStage is one. Like we're agnostic. We don't care where you're deploying. We're going to give you the context of where you are, tell you, if we're embedding security, we're doing the things that you need to ensure your things are available. So at the end of the day, that is a statistic to me is absolutely appropriate of what I'm seeing in the market right now. People are like looking at this and saying, look, I might have all my eggs in one basket. This is forcing me to try to look at ways I could deploy things in much more of a significant way to ensure my business is running. So that is an awesome stat. I'd love to have like a copy of that for one of my slides there. And that's awesome, dude. You
bet. I just dropped it in the chat for you. Another stat here, and then we'll get commentary on that one as well, is DevOps budgets are actually going up this year and next year. About 74% of respondents said that their DevOps budgets were increasing in this coming year, not decreasing, with over half of them expecting their budgets to grow by 25% or more. So Matt, let's start. Any commentary on that one you'd offer?
I have commentary on the other one.
Oh, this one or the first one?
No, the first one. I would have said that it was a blip if COVID would have been a blip itself. But all the companies out there, we're starting to see them all center around a single date. July 2021 is what we're hearing from almost every major corporation and even small companies. And given the length of time that this is lasting, we're moving into a permanent situation here. But I would hazard to say a lot of that moving into the public cloud is moving things like you have Atlassian on premise, and it's kind of a pain in the ass getting to that across the VPN. So we're going to now subscribe to Atlassian in the cloud. So I think there's a lot of that type of shifting to SaaS applications.
Mm-hmm. I'll comment on the other one, Dan, if you want to keep moving forward.
Yeah, please.
I think that it seems sort of counterintuitive to be spending more on DevOps while we're facing sort of economic uncertainty and COVID and things like that. But what's happening to a lot of these businesses is their longer term transformation projects, whether you want to call it digital transformation or whatever sort of buzzword. But the reality is that the user interface of a lot of traditional organizations has gone online. And these dramatic changes in demand, for example, the airline industry, while they had a rapid reduction in flight travel, had a huge demand in their web traffic as people were trying to clamor for refunds and rescheduling. And so the digital experience goes way up. If you're a grocery store, suddenly your user experience is a mobile app, and your store is now a logistics center, not a retail location. And this, to Matt's point, has no sign of kind of slowing down right now. So the need for reliability and the need for managing software updates to being reactive to whatever policies and rules are happening in the market, they have to be reactive. And so the investment in DevOps makes perfect logical sense, even as executives are tightening their purse strings in other places, right? And they're thinking about how to contract costs in other places. The DevOps site reliability engineering, cloud infrastructure, etc. This is a must-do for the business to survive and to thrive in this condition.
And like you said, their legacy tools are not doing the things that they need. So they're starting to move these things over. So they're going to need Noble 9. They're going to need like the, JFrogs out there to, for code binary and vulnerability scanning aspects. I mean, something similar to what Sysdig's doing. We're embedding security in those environments to be able to do like runtime protection. If somebody's in these environments, when you move them over, you do not have that level of visibility that you have now. So, this is absolutely appropriate. They're going to spend more money to eventually spend less. I mean, it's capitalism without a doubt.
Well, and to the point about to Kit's point about kind of elasticity, I'm going to plug an article I wrote about a month ago for Forbes called "Where DevOps Should Focus in a Post-Crisis World," and something that kind of is tied to that trend is that there's just a lot more uncertainty, and cloud allows you that elasticity, and especially cloud native. I mean, if you're using Kubernetes, the elasticity is a lot better than what you're dealing with otherwise. So check out the full survey results when you get a chance. We're going to keep things moving with favorite talks. And so start with you, Kat. Did you have a favorite talk from today that you wanted to talk about?
Well, my talk is tomorrow, so I can't hawk it as my favorite talk so far. But,
it will be your favorite talk tomorrow.
It's going to be my favorite
my
talk as well.
Yeah, it'll be my favorite talk tomorrow. So, make sure you come see my favorite talk tomorrow. But I have to fangirl a little bit, actually. Chris Nova is probably one of my favorite people, just like in general. So it is always a pleasure to watch Chris talk. No matter what.
This was the Squarespace talk, right?
Shopify.
Sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, hey.
Sorry. Yeah, the keynote. Yeah.
One of the biggest e-commerce, web commerce sites in the world, man. Come on.
Yeah, come on, dude. No, Chris is incredibly smart and incredibly pleasant to watch on stage. So anytime she's talking, I'm thrilled to watch it.
No, she knows her stuff.
I'm going to echo Kat on that favorite talk, but also I'm going to say, again, it's a good tie between her and I think Priya did an amazing job. So did Cheryl Hung. Cheryl Hung just talking about, some of her, talking about early Linux and, installing it. I mean, we've all walked in those shoes and, again, it's just a great day to kick things off. I think Liz Rice did something pretty amazing as well. Props to you, Liz. So, everybody's,
if Liz Rice did something amazing, it must be a day that ends with Y.
Yeah. Yeah. Good call. Very cool.
I just want to plug a talk on Wednesday. There's a Prometheus deep dive that I'm particularly excited about. I don't want to pile on too much about the other stuff. The keynotes were great. Everything was cool today. But on Wednesday, the Prometheus deep dive looks like a great talk, and I'm planning to be there.
I'm going to also be watching that one. That seems really, really interesting. I don't know enough about Prometheus.
And I just did an interview with one of the speakers, Bartek, and we posted on the YouTube channel. He gives a demo of Thanos. That's pretty cool. So I'm pretty stoked on the Prometheus and Thanos stuff going on.
Yeah, Thanos is cool.
Oh, thanks for the link there, Taryn, in the chat. Matt?
I really enjoyed Chris's talk, but I want to kind of just shout out for some of the smaller talks that are going on, so like Tetrate's doing one on building a distributed API gateway with a service mesh that I've been looking forward to for today. That's today's talk. So that's one I'm looking forward to, is some of the service mesh ones. And then also some of the machine learning ones that are going to be happening across the next few days.
Yeah, I noticed some of the talks that I was kind of interested in was we've had for a few years, and I mean, I've given some of them on Canary and blue-green deployments, and those, I feel like there's a lot of maturity that's come there. And so there was a talk that was given by Victor Farsick and another guy about progressive delivery that I thought was interesting, because they really tried to contextualize it in a larger sense rather than kind of a tech demo sense. And so I thought that was particularly strong. Other news coming out, SUSE buys Rancher Labs. Any comment on that?
Congratulations to them.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, really, like, K3S is so cool. And it's, unfortunately, K3S is how I learned Kubernetes. So that was like definitely a directly into the fire approach, trying to get.
Is it frowned upon to call it K3s? Is there an official?
I don't know. I've always said K3S. Am I being mean?
It's K3S. I haven't heard it otherwise.
I always say K3, like K Gates.
K-Trays.
Trace.
K-Trace.
Tray. That sounds like a rapper.
It's a beer, I think. Yeah.
Is it? Okay.
No.
Sure.
Couldn't have happened to a better crew. Though Darren Shepard and those folks over there. I mean, they're just some awesome people. I love how his Twitter is literally stream of consciousness, amazing. I mean, the guy's just like, why are we doing this? I'm gonna create my own distro, and then midstream he's like, I don't know. I need to rethink this. It's beautiful, man. His Twitter is magic, without a doubt. Shout out.
I'm so happy for them. They deserve it.
I think there's I agree. Great companies, both better together, and SUSE has gone through their share of changes with sort of the private equity changes that they've had, and there's a bigger context, I would say, about the state of the market. And if you look at what I've called for the last 10 years or so has been kind of this expansionary process, right? We've gone and we've seen these technologies spawn out of the big tech companies, right? Cloud technologies and other DevOps technologies, et cetera, have all come out of the innovation that was hidden inside of Google, Facebook, et cetera. And then now created all this new startup innovation. And now we're seeing the consolidation really coming together. And I think it's accelerating. I mean, if you look at the list of companies in the CNCF, every CNCF marketing meeting, pretty much, and board meeting, they present a slide of all of the acquisitions that have happened within the CNCF community, and it's comically long at this point. I think Matt's on there as well with StackPoint, bought by NetApp. It's a comically long list of acquisitions that have been made within the community, and it's continuing. And I think at some point we're going to see more and more of this consolidation. I think the interesting question is it all going to consolidate up to the top companies in the world? Because don't forget, our biggest sponsors of cloud are also some of the world's largest companies. Or will there be a kind of a mid tier, right? We'll see these companies sort of at the the NetApp and VMware, and then at the SUSE level that will have this consolidation. And will it be centered around cloud, or will it be centered around developer tools? These are a lot of interesting questions about the way that it kind of formulates, but these globules are sort of absorbing, and I think we're going to see that speed up.
Speaking of consolidation, Kit, the rumor mill is saying that D2IQ, aka the company formerly known as Mesosphere, aka the former leader in all things clustered applications, is in talks to be acquired by none other than Google, your old boss. So, any comments on that?
I, of course, have no comment on that, Dan, but thank you.
I don't believe the rumors. I know Google worked with Mesosphere to kind of work with them with Kubernetes at the beginning before Google released it as an open source project. I think the bigger question is who's going to buy VMware, Amazon, Google, or Microsoft?
You think VMware is in the acquisition play?
I'm not saying they're in the acquisition play. I'm saying that Dell's EMC is spinning them off. Amazon, Google, and Microsoft are hungry for the on-premise workloads. That's where most of the workloads are. Google and Amazon don't play well on-prem. Microsoft definitely has market there. So likely Google, you could see acquiring them versus acquiring D2IQ.
Well, that's actually interesting that you bring them up, because VMware, of course, also announced that they're acquiring Heptio and Pivotal and Octarine.
That's quite a laundry list.
Yeah, that was a while ago, right? Though, but all of
Pivotal
these
was a while ago.
All of that is over a year ago.
Yeah, Pivotal was. Oh no, Heptio. Oh wait. Am I mixing up?
So Heptio was a while back. So that's Joe Bade and Craig McLucky and that team, and they couldn't have it to a better team. And it all goes back to what you said earlier, Dan, about that whole overall consolidation. All these things are making sense if you think about CoreOS. Like, so Tanzu, right, is the offspring of that acquisition. I mean, great people over there, Joe Beado, Waleed, all the great folks over there. But if you think about like Red Hat acquiring CoreOS, all these things all made sense. And now with SUSE taking over Rancher, fantastic stuff. It's just, and all of these things are making sense to make their overall kind of platforms amazing. Just like my friend Matt Baldwin and the team with StackPoint getting acquired by NetApp. I mean, that just made complete sense just to expand their horizon. So it's all good stuff.
Yeah, it looks like I had clicked over to my KubeCon 2019 news for that last one. Sorry about that.
We all got our DeLorean with you.
Do you have the 2021 news? We can talk about next year's.
Yeah,
news.
we can get it. Let's switch over to that tab. There was a report coming out. I think it was part of the Kubecon opening talks around how there's been a 2,100% increase in the number of Kubernetes related jobs and job searches over the last 4 years, which makes perfect sense to me. A 2,000% increase sounds almost small, doesn't it? Given the way this market is moving. There's no comment on that. Then the other thing that was in the news was that there was a report that 3 years ago, about 23% of surveyed operations people said they were using containers in production, up now to 84%. Any thoughts on that stat?
We did a survey, Sysdig did a survey, and it continues to grow. We're seeing like real workloads running on our SaaS, and that they will continue to grow as folks are moving over to these app transfer. It goes back to that stat you showed in that original slide where folks are moving these workloads. They want portable mechanisms for doing that. They want security, they want observability, they want folks whatever Noble Nine's doing in terms of SLOs. They want what JFrog's doing, they know what Sysdig's doing to be able to do those things on top of it. So again, we will continue to see that trending upward. Is in my own humble opinion.
Yeah, I think the container as a unit of deployment, it just makes sense. I've been a big advocate for containerized deployments for a long time because I like many of you, I'm sure, got really frustrated with package dependency collisions and all the other problems that come with VMs. And when I discovered the way that containers work, it blew my mind. And it's really amazing. And the way that we did it inside of Google with Borg, and then exposing it, and it's not surprising to me that it's caught on at this level, and I think we'll see a very high saturation of the containers. Now, will it be on the other stat, right, the 2,100% growth and all this? These are just numbers. To me, it's like, does it really mean something, or is it a stat that's gonna? It's kind of I don't know, what is it really indicating, I guess is my question. And I think there's the need for some amount of Kubernetes literacy across the entire SDLC, the entire software development cycle, right? There is some need for it. And so it makes sense that this term has kind of become included in a bunch of job descriptions. It's become part of the educational curriculum. You're supposed to have, 12 years of experience with Kubernetes now? Right. I only know a couple people that have that level of experience. I don't know if you saw that job description floating around. I don't know. It's kind of like these terms get added into the zeitgeist of the recruiting process, and it just kind of gets lumped in there. So I don't really know what that means. But the container adoption, to me, this seems like a legit thing. And whether you're doing it with Kubernetes or not, using container images as a packaging format makes just a heck of a lot of sense.
Kat, we're near the end.
Yep.
Yeah, Kat, we're near the end, and I wanted to give you the final word on this.
I think it will continue to skyrocket. I do agree with Kit that the data seems a little bit, what is the source of the 2,100% number? That's because there's a difference between putting Kubernetes in your job description because you want somebody to know what Kubernetes is and expecting them to actually be able to use Kubernetes. There's a world of difference between me, I know what Kubernetes is and I can kind of use it, and Ian Coldwater, you cannot compare the two of us. So what does Kubernetes jobs mean? But yeah. I do think that we're going to see continued adoption of containers. It's once you understand it, and even just a little bit, using containers to deploy is just easier. It really just is, especially as a Python developer. Oh my God, I rarely build something in Python that I don't deploy in a Docker container.
And you have a generation. You have a generation starting with this as their basis, right?
Yeah.
So starting with this, and this is going to be the tool that they're going to use to contain things, and eventually it could be that future or fad serverless. I mean, it could be whatever that mechanism is going to be.
Well, we are at time, and wanted to say a big thanks to everybody for joining. Be sure to tune into tomorrow's panel, which includes mostly new people. I think Matt Baldwin's coming back, but or he's coming back later. I don't remember. But Kit, Pop, and Kat especially thank you for joining us today. And of course, Matt, for joining us. So tune back in tomorrow. If you have topics that you'd like to discuss, hit us up on Twitter, either at CodeFresh or at Today Was Awesome, my personal Twitter account. And we will see you then. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
everyone. Dan. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks,
See you
Taryn.
later.
Thanks, everybody.
Enjoy KubeCon.
Watching everyone.
Bye.